In this presentation, I'm going to go over the lesson plan for using one of Mostyn's spectrum of teaching. So if you are using spectrum of teaching, one of the teaching styles, you use this lesson template. If you are using something other than Mostyn's spectrum of teaching, you should not watch, or you're not going to use this lesson plan template. So I have several documents I'm going to go over and a task sheet. So this is a bit different than Fink's model. You actually had an assignment where you discuss this, what the difference between Fink and Bain and Mostyn. So you're going to provide a lesson title, and then you're going to describe all the things that happen before the lesson. That's called Preimpact. You'll get rid of these directions in your actual lesson. You're going to state the learning objectives. In the lesson, that example I'm giving you doesn't have anything from the athletic training competencies, but let me give you an example of that real quick. I'm going to switch over to a different lesson template. Let's see, which one is it? This one? Okay, this is from Fink's model, but the thing I'm trying to focus on is the athletic training area for the student learning objectives. Okay, so you're going to provide the content area, which in the this is from the NATA educational competencies, will be evidence-based practice. And then what expected outcome. We already picked all these earlier in the class. Expected outcome, I provide it, and I quote it directly from the book or the document, cite it correctly. So we're doing define evidence-based practice as it relates to athletic training clinical practice. And then from there, we're going to write a specific student learning objective, or SOLO, based on the expected outcome, because this doesn't have all the items that I want in an SOLO. Because in the SOLO, I want to make sure that you have this phrase, the student will be able to, the behavior, the condition, and the criterion for that expected outcome. So let's go back. So the student will be able to define, that's the verb, they're defining what evidence-based practice as it relates to athletic training clinical practice. That's the behavior that they have to do. And the condition for mastery is they have to score 80% or greater on the written exam, explaining what that all means. So that is turning the expected outcome into a measurable student learning objective, or SOLO. I have another SOLO. The student will be able to develop, this is actually from our syllabus, the student will be able to develop, that's the verb, strategies, that's also a verb, strategies that synthesize current athletic training and higher education literature on learning theory and motivation in order to actively engage all learners and produce optimal learning. That's the behavior. That's what you're doing in this assignment. Actually, the athletic training lesson assignment. With a score of 80% or greater, that's the minimal level that students need to reach in order to pass that assignment. That's what criteria for mastery is, 80% or greater on this assignment. Okay, so let's go to my example lesson. So I have given the lesson the volleyball bump, the pre-impact. I should get rid of that for this. Okay, the student learning objectives. All students will be able to perform the volleyball bump from a distance of 5 feet, 10 feet, or 15 feet to either a small or large target 8 out of 10 times. All students will be able to describe how to perform a volleyball bump with a score of 80% or greater on a written exam. So that's the learning objectives. Now, SHAPE is the PE standards, so I'm not going to go over those, but those are the standards that are being addressed in this particular lesson. Now, there's some other things that you need to address in the pre-impact, or all these things: teaching style, whom to teach. Now, in your template, I've provided what this stuff means. Teaching style. What teaching style will be used? So that's the Mostyn teaching styles. In our example lesson, we're using inclusion. You don't have to say anything else. Just say what it is. Whom to teach. Who are your students? For this class, the entire class will be addressed at first. Then classes will perform the task on their own. Students may help each other as needed. So that's what you'll put in there. Who's going to be in? Is it the entire class, or individual? Because if you have a clinical one, it may be an individual and just happens to happen. Subject matter, what is the lesson topic? That's going to go back up to what you've written about your educational competencies, evidence-based practice, and specifically, what is evidence-based practice? For the volleyball lesson, it's the volleyball bump pass. How long is the lesson? 50 minutes, 90 minutes? How long is that lesson? Modes of communication, how will you talk to your students during the lesson? How will you communicate during the lesson? So let's go back to our example lesson. Lecture, demonstration of skill, individual program. Oh, that's actually a task sheet. And individual and group verbal feedback. Okay. What are you going to do with questions when students ask you questions? The teacher will answer individual questions and or stop the class to provide group feedback and answer questions. Organizational arrangements. The following, so this is equipment. The other thing that can be addressed in organizational arrangement is how should the students be organized? How is the classroom, lab, or clinic organized for optimal learning, and what equipment is needed? Where to teach? In the example lesson, I have in the gym. Is this going to be in a typical classroom, athletic training room? Is it in a clinical setting? Wherever it's going to take place. You don't have to explain it, just put it there. Do the students' attire and appearance? Do the students have to wear a certain type of clothing? Or just normal clothing? And you can just write that, normal clothing, nothing special. And assessment procedures and material. What assessment procedures and or materials are needed? So let's go to our example lesson. Students will complete individual program. And this is called task sheet later on, so I should have changed that before I did this. Sorry. All right, so then after you're done with that, you actually do the lesson. I got a table here, and you'll see in this example, I have the table, time, activities, feedback, organization, very detailed. If it's a 90-minute lesson, every minute should be described here. So if you go to our lesson here, I have 2 minutes. Demonstration of inclusion concept with use of rope, which comes from the textbook. Any feedback that may be given during that time, which it's not a lot yet. Organization, how the students, students in line. 1 minute to do these things, 2 minutes to do those things, 1 minute to do those things, 5 minutes to do these things, 2 minutes to do these things, 1 minute to do that thing, 30 minutes to do this thing, 3 minutes to do these things. So all that should add up to whatever time I said the class lesson's going to take. So the goal is that I should be able to take this part of your lesson, the whole lesson plan, and be able to reproduce the lesson without any other materials other than the task sheet that we'll talk about in a little bit. Well, let's go ahead and talk about it. So with Boston's teaching styles, everybody's going to be required to have a kind of task sheet where they have a lesson to follow. I don't know if Command does, but we're not using Command. So I actually developed this task sheet when I took a class like this, but it's for volleyball. In the book, it's for golf. So you can read that. It's just given the details. I'm going to provide another task sheet that's athletic training related. And here is the athletic training task sheet, carpal bones, palpation task sheet, and hopefully not everybody does this. So I'm not going to show it too much because I don't want everybody just to do it. So it has how to actually do this. This is for reciprocal style of teaching. So you can see that the goal of the task sheet is for students to be able to follow along on their own, because part of the goal of the Boston teaching styles is get the students to learn on their own. All right. Post-impact, we're going to talk about, let's go ahead and go to my template. Assessment of the lesson, and on page 25 of the book it has that. How will you know that the students have satisfied learning objectives? How will you know that students have met the SLOs? Is it formal, informal, same as the formative or summative? Now this part you will not turn in on your very first lesson plan rough draft. This will happen the next week. I'll give you feedback on the first part, pre-impact and impact on your first lesson plan. On your second lesson plan will be pre-impact, impact, and post-impact set, which include the assessment. And you'll include your task sheet. Your task sheet will be on a brand new page to turn in. Again, the goal is that another person can use the lesson plan and be able to teach the lesson just based on the lesson plan. If you have questions, please feel free to ask.